Hello everybody and welcome back to another Hellbound Garage. First things first, I must confess, the last video of physically working on the Datsun did not actually go as smoothly as I thought. A couple of days after I had finished doing the brake system, I found that there was leaks. And, well, I ended up redoing, I think, 4 of the 5 brake lines that I made to connect the master cylinder to the new proportioning valve back to the rest of the brake system. And from what I can tell, the problem stemmed from, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see it, probably not because it's very small, but these are the cut ends off of my old brake lines, and these were double flared fittings. Now, I don't do a lot with brake systems because, well, honestly, brake systems are one of those things that are unassumingly scary, because if you do these yourself and you mess up and you're racing your car and your work fails, you could go off into a wall or whatever at a very high rate of speed, causing lots of damage and lots of injuries. But the older I get, the more comfortable I get with working with these systems. Now, the last brake system that I did, I used a single flare system or setup, and come to find out, that's not very safe either. The more you know. So I went out and bought a very specific tool, and this just happened to be from Harbor Freight, but it works just as well. It's the double flare tool kit. What makes this special is this guy right here. Now, these are small dies, if I can get them out of here. And what happens is you put your brake line into this at a certain depth, clamp it down, and then instead of just using this to flare it out, you actually use this guy to crush it in and kind of make almost a bubble flare. At that point, you then take that little piece out and use the normal tool to crush down the flare and make it the double flare, essentially a double walled flare. My problem, at least from what I can figure out, is, so this is what you clamp your line into, and I think my problem was that, you see how this has a lot of movement? I think these weren't perfectly lined up, and what ended up happening is I created a small crease in part of the brake line, and I thought it would be good enough to just use my small file set and file that ridge down, and I'm guessing that wasn't the correct choice, and that is what caused all of my leaks. Now, they were very minor leaks, you had to put a lot of brake pressure to them, but those are the kind of the things that hopefully this car sees on a normal basis, is hard braking, hard turn-ins, whatever. So as I was working on that, I ended up getting really frustrated during the whole process, having to redo work that I already did. One, because I gotta redo it, and two, my lines weren't as nicely bent this time around because, well, I had an engine and everything else in the way, so I couldn't make them nicer. And in that whole process of getting grumpy and angry at life, I ended up actually stripping out one of the threads on the lower side of this Wilwood proportioning valve and had to buy a new one. And, well, go figure, they are $30 more than when I bought them the first time around. So that was big issue number one. And then the second issue is that my auto plumb fittings finally came in, which no downside to the company or anything, they're great. But because they came in, I started rolling into a new set of problems, and that was the overall fitment of the fittings and the hose in between all the parts in my engine bay. This top line was nice and easy, well, relatively easy. It starts to do something that they kind of tell you don't want to go for, and that is an S shape. This is a very minimal kind of S, so it should be okay. We'll find out after heat pressure is applied to this, water pump pressure alone, this is fine. all the irritation came from down here, and I'm not sure how well you're going to be able to see that, but there is that silver fitting was the fitting I was waiting on. That is a 30-degree fitting, and that goes into a small chunk of hose that then goes into a hose end, a union, a 90, an itty bitty little chunk of hose into a hose end, and then the adapter for the radiator. Now, if you can't tell, right there, that is the steering rack boot and the 90-degree fitting. See how close they are? That took absolutely forever to get right, and honestly, I'm not happy with it. The templates definitely got me in the ballpark of what I needed, but until I had the full thick part instead of just the paper part, I would never be able to tell 100% how tight that fitment is, and it is tight. But I have turned the wheel lock to lock, and there's no problems. Right now it doesn't leak, so we're good. But it took a while. Here's just a few of my cuts. You know, each one of these taking off a little more and more because it just wouldn't fit by that little bit. So that was irritating, but didn't have too many problems. I do have to say though, after the engine gets heat into it and that pressure is actually built into the cooling system, we'll see if any of this fails. I've already, because I just got back from vacation for a week, I had some time to kind of think about it and step away from this whole project because it's been really irritating. And if any of that fails, I have come up with a much simpler solution, which I probably should have done before because it's way cheaper and everything. But that means outsourcing a little bit of work to somebody else. But I do have a friend of a friend that does aluminum work, and I think I will reach out to that person if this fails. Let's hope it doesn't, because that is a lot of money in fittings. Now, the very last thing that ended up being a problem before we are completely caught up and actually get into what we're doing in this video is regarding the cooling system in another location. And that is that I have a coolant leak on the back of the cylinder head back here, which, if you can't tell, there is all kinds of stuff back here. But I rolled the car, because I can do that, out into the driveway, filled the cooling system, ran the water pump to test the AN lines, and found that there was a leak back here. Problem with that is where it was leaking, cannot tell where it was actually at. So we're gonna throw in a time lapse here of me taking this thing apart, or at least the top end, to hopefully track down the water leak or the coolant leak that is coming from the backside of this head. Wish me luck, because it's kind of a shot in the dark, because there's so much stuff back there you can't tell. So it's going to be an elimination process. Alright, so that was super irritating, depending on the speed of the time lapse, because I haven't gotten to that part yet. You may have noticed that I got most of the top end of motor torn apart, and found out that the intake manifold bolts were loose. All of them were loose. And the thing is I'm not entirely sure why that even happened, because there is the intake manifold gaskets, there is the what they call on the small block Chevy the China rail, that has gasket maker on it and everything else. Everything is done appropriately, but the bolts are all loose. The only thing I can think of is that I put the sealant on the walls, put the manifold down, hand tightened everything, was going to let the sealant firm up a little bit before completely tightening it, and then I just forgot. I don't know. But anyways, as you saw in the video, I ran the water pump, filled the entire cooling system with water, and there's no more leak. I'm not sure if you can see it on the back side of the head, but there's no more leak. So fantastic. I don't have to tear it apart any further, because let me tell you, getting that manifold back in place, giant pain in the butt. Now you'll notice there is a wiper cowl sitting on this car. And that is because the next thing that is happening in this video, whether or not they let me film it, is I'm getting a new front windshield. Lucky enough for me, one of the glass companies in town that I've actually used before on the Mazda actually managed to get a hold of a windshield for the Datsun, which honestly is kind of rare, because I thought only like Z Motorsports could get their hands on a windshield, but apparently this company can. So they are coming into my garage. Instead of me taking the car to them, they're coming here and they're going to install a windshield on this car, which makes me happy, because this is one more thing that it's been over 5 years since this thing has had glass in it. So I am either going to insert a time lapse here of them installing the glass, or after the glass is installed, I will check back in with you and show you what it looks like. Later. We have a window! Yes! First time in 5 years this thing has glass in it. Super happy. Now, unfortunately, the guys kind of started off on a bad note. They didn't realize that this was a gasket style window. Most modern day windows use just a kind of like a seam sealer almost. But these older ones, they use a gasket to seal the edge of the glass to the metal. And well, they left the gasket at their shop, so they had to go back and get that and then come back and put it in. So their day didn't exactly start off that great, so I didn't even bother asking them about videoing it, because I just didn't want to go down that road. But yes, 5 years, finally have a window. And I know for most people are going to be like, oh, it's just a window, but for me, this is a huge deal. This has just been a giant gaping hole for ages, and now there's some, I mean, this makes it more real to me that we are getting this much closer to being able to drive this car on the road. Now for the moment, if you know anything about Datsuns, you'll know that they have the chrome trim that goes into this gasket, which I was very happy that this gasket that they got for this window had that. I'm going to leave my trim out of there, because I'm not sure if I want to do chrome or if I want to make it black. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do, so I don't damage that trim piece. I'm just going to leave it where I've been storing it until I come to a final decision on this. But that now means that I can get to the next part of this video, and we're going to try and start this car. There is a bunch of little things, little tests that I have to do to make sure that sensors are set up and everything else, and I'm going to just blow right by that and take care of that all off video. And when I have all that taken care of, I'll come back and we will try to get this thing started up.
A little later.